going to pray, and then we'll take a look into the Word. Dear Heavenly Father, do love our moms, and just want to pray a special blessing on each one. Pray that you'll be guiding and protecting our homes and our families and giving us wisdom. And even as we take a look at the Scripture today, I want to pray that you be guiding us. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, going to look into Genesis chapter 16, talk about a mom and a mom-to-be, and Sarah and Hagar, and that famous story in the Bible about that rivalry and what happened there. Definitely some lessons on parenting that we're going to be taking from this story tonight or today. How about the Northern Lights? Some of you got to see it, right? Some of you went out. It's pretty amazing, actually, to have a bucket list experience in Ohio that you think you would have to go to Iceland or Alaska or somewhere else to see. And it's amazing. I mean, you're naked, your eye doesn't catch the light like your cameras do, because your cameras see way more. I knew that going in. I mean, my camera can always see way more than I can see. So what an amazing and a beautiful experience. And so we waited a long time, and I would say it was worth the wait, right? You know what I mean? To have a storm like that, to see it. And I saw a lot of your pictures, by the way. I know a lot of people also went up there. There were a lot of cars at Walnut. I've never seen that many cars at Walnut Beach, actually. Trying to stay parked there. And there are no lines. So it was, if anybody down at Walnut Beach on Friday night, it was kind of mayhem, because there aren't those lines to park, and everyone's just parking a big blob of cars. That's how it was. But definitely something absolutely beautiful to see. And some things that we find in life, it's worth waiting for. Some things in life, people want to jump ahead. And this is a story where Sarah wants to jump ahead of what God's will is. And it's going to cause problems. We don't even have time to look into the whole history of what will happen in future years. I mean, I believe there's still war and hard feelings because of this story way back when between the Jewish people and some of the Arab races and other groups because of this. And actually, Ishmael is going to be born. All the Muslim groups trace their heritage back to Abraham through Ishmael. The Jewish people would trace their lineage back through Isaac, who will be born later on. So a lot of mayhem that's going to come out of this story. But in it, as we take a look at it, the gist of it is Sarah can't have a child. God said that she would, right? So it goes a while. I mean, they're there probably a good 10 years in that land. She hasn't had a child yet, so she says to Abraham, well, look, why don't you take my servant, Hagar, Egyptian servant, probably one that they picked up when they were in Egypt, by the way. And so why don't you take her, have a child with her, and then we'll extend the family that way. And Abraham agrees with it. Now, once this happens, Hagar becomes haughty. She starts looking down on Sarah. Sarah responds by treating her harshly. She runs away. Hagar does. An angel finds her and sends her back, and then she says, I've seen the God who sees me, which is super famous. I mean, the name that she gave for God. So for this story, there's a lot going on here. And the first thing that I want to talk about is we've got a parent in humility. In verses 1 through 6, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now she knows she's pregnant. She despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. So we look at this story, and I would like to start out this way and suggest that human pride, silly human pride, is a player. And I'm saying that in part, obviously, Hagar gets prideful when she becomes pregnant because she's looking down on Sarai. And I would like to suggest also that for Sarai, part of this is just the weight she puts on herself. It's just this human pride of, I have to have a family. That's what everyone expects of me. And because in some ways her pride was wounded not having a child, she is going to put her basically servant right into the arms of her husband. So it's wounded pride. And it's going to put her will above what God's will is. And sometimes we can do it. In our own pride, we can start putting our will ahead of God's will. We can even jump ahead of God and what His timing and what His plan is. And so the question is, can your pride get in the way of your faith? I think it can. From this story, we're just to trust in God and say, let God work this out. Instead of me jumping ahead of God and doing something else, why not just trust God to take care of it? But because she just had to have it. I have to have this baby right now. I have to. So she's jumping ahead of God in this time. And I think sometimes we can have that mentality too, where we have this, I've got something in my mind, it needs to happen now. You get into a marriage problem, it needs to get fixed now. If it doesn't get fixed now in the next 2 weeks, 1 month, whatever it is, 2 months, you know what? I'm just going to have to get out of here because, I just don't even know what I can do about it because it's just hard right now and it's got to be fixed now. It's now or it's nothing. Or I have to have this position in my life and I have to have it now. I have to have this thing in my life and I have to have it now. And so we start to jump ahead. And I get that years had passed by since this promise, but she's forcing the situation by putting this woman into Abram's arms. I'm telling you, you look at verse 3, and I'm sure they didn't walk anyone down the aisle, but it's almost like in our mind, the way we receive it, she did. Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave and gave her to her husband to be his wife. It's almost like when the dad's walking the bride down the aisle, you know what I'm saying? And we call it the leave taking, right? We give her away. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? Her mother and I, right? And so you got Sarai doing this with Hagar, putting them right together. And is this a good decision? No. Is it a culturally appropriate decision? Yes. Culture accepted it. This is like a normal thing for these people. So if somebody's married and that person had a servant, if the gal couldn't become pregnant, they built their family that way. They would say, we'll take the servant and go ahead and marry her. And in the culture's eye, as weird as this is for us, because I'm telling you, we can't even conceive it. We have a man, this wouldn't happen. You know what I'm saying? Just wouldn't happen in our society without a lot of sparks and everything else flying. But in this culture, this is how they handled it. Is it the right thing to do? I would say, biblically speaking, no. Because one man, one woman, right? It's God's plan all the way from the beginning. So I would say, biblically speaking, no. But culture had twisted it. It made another way. So I look at this and say, okay, well, could pride then cause us to embrace culture over Christianity? I want to be one of the cool kids, right? So my silly human pride, I want to be accepted. All right, and maybe there's a high school student that wants to be accepted. How far do you take that pride of what people think of you? How much are you willing to do to have the approval of the world around you and your friends? Are you willing to be immoral? Are you willing to try drugs? What would you do to be popular? Right? And what's that all about? It's just your silly human pride. And you can't sacrifice God's will and put Him aside just because you're prideful and you want that acceptance of other people. You may end up dressing a little less modestly to fit in. You may think you need a certain car as you get older, or live in a certain neighborhood. You got to involve yourself in certain behaviors because that's how you get accepted. And again, pretty soon if we're not careful, we're going to look a lot more like culture than we do Christ. Could it be a problem? And I think for all of us, we just have to evaluate our own lives, say, yes, pride making me kind of make decisions that really is not what God wants, it's just what I want. Is this starting to happen in my own life? In Ecclesiastes 4:4, and I saw that all the toil and all the achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless and chasing after the wind. Did you guys catch that? All toil, all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. And we've said it for years, the keeping up with the Joneses. Right? Why do I want to keep up with the Joneses? I want to keep up with the Joneses because, in our own silly human pride, we somehow set that up as the goal and the standard that we have to somehow be there. Rather than saying, well, where does God really want me to be? Now, as a parent, because it's Mother's Day, right? And we want to look at the parenting aspect of some of this. Might we parent in pride? Well, my kids need certain opportunities, and my kids need to be the best. Okay? At what cost? Right? Now I've been here, I've been alive so long, I was alive before there was travel ball. Does anybody remember those days, right? It used to be, you played sport in its season. So if it's basketball season. If it's track, it's track. If it's soccer, football, baseball, softball, whatever it was, they had their season. That is not the way it rolls now. I mean, if you want your kid in a sport, sometimes you're dedicated to the sport, and it's 12 months, that one sport. So in order to do that, you can't do that in high school. You get involved in these travel ball teams. Okay, you're going to go travel ball. Here's a question. Are you going to church? Where's God fit in all this? But my kid's got to be the best. My kid's got to be the best. Says who? Why does anybody even, and by the way, why do our kids need to be better than anyone else's kids anyway? Right? What does that matter? I've always said to my kids, I had no interest in my kids being the best. I just wanted them to do their best. There's a difference. There's a difference between driving a kid to do their best and driving a kid to be the best. Well, sometimes those kids aren't skilled to be the best. And you're going to drive them crazy trying to push them that way. Right? For what? For our own silly human pride. We might take pride in the fact that, well, my kid's so athletic and my kid's so smart and my kid's on the honor roll and so on and so forth. Did you actually make your kid? Or did maybe God have a hand in this? And if God had a hand in it, shouldn't God get the credit? And I not take pride in it? And do I think we should be proud of our kids? Oh, you better believe, yes, I do. Because when I look at proud of my kids, I look at the word pride and I associate it with just say, I'm just happy for them. I'm happy. Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to start thinking we're better than someone, to start looking down on somebody else because of all these things, taking pride in the parenting, no, that's where we've got to be so careful. I saw a movie just this last week called Blue Miracles. Anyone seen that movie? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's like, I can tell, trust me. No, it's not that. Blue Miracle was a movie about orphans in Mexico, and they ended up getting teamed up with this kind of, in some ways, down on his luck, fishing chart. Have you seen that one, right? So it was really a nice movie. And so he's taking these orphans out, and you'll have to watch the movie to see why, and they're fishing in this enormous fishing tournament. And so they're talking to him about his son. Do you have a child? Yeah, I have a child. Where's your child live? Well, he lived in the United States. Well, why aren't you with your child? Well, because I'm a fisherman, because I want to give these trophies to my kids someday. And these little orphans are telling him, your kid doesn't want the trophy. Your kid wants you. And I think about how many things, we think that we do for our kids. Man, well, my kids need this better home. My kids need this better car. My kids need this addition on the house. My kids need this. Okay. What they need is you. Right? But in our own keeping up with the Joneses, our own mindset, sometimes we start to lose sight. And this story pointed that out, as well as some other lessons as well. So we don't want to parent in pride. I just wanted my kids to have good memories. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, I just live for them to do the right thing, get them launched right, and just have some good memories along the way. So that when we all got old, and we all are, you know what I'm saying? So I'll have good memories, they'll have good memories. That was really a big deal to me. Not about parenting in this pride. Human pride can also cause you to look down on others because she despises. It says that Hagar despised Sarai, which means to have contempt, which means to lower somebody in your mind, to even curse them, your esteem. You're treating them like they're nothing. And whether it's snide remarks, copping an attitude, whatever it is, Sarah's got this mentality, or Hagar has this mentality, that you're now less because I can have a child and you can't. Man, that had to hurt. You know what I'm saying? Think about that from Sarah's position, how much that would sting. And just this constant, whether it's a sarcastic comment, there was something she was doing that let everyone around her know that she was looking down on Sarah because she was elevated in her own mind. And what I don't want us to do is to elevate ourselves in our own minds because of anything. Not because of our looks, not because of our money, not because of education, not because of our job, not because of position, not because of anything. When I start elevating myself to the point where I'm kind of like looking at everyone else like they're somehow below me, I'm operating out of pride. And when I'm operating out of pride, this is going nowhere good. So have we become prideful? Prideful to the point that we would look down on people who somehow have less, like in this situation, Hagar's pregnant and Sarah's not. I would say for any one of us, let's not look down on others. And here's another thing I see about human pride. Human pride tends to blame other people. I'm amazed by verse 5, and I'm going to talk about this later on too, that there could be a point here, but Sarai said to Abram, "You're responsible for the wrong I am suffering." I'm like, I've always thought about this. What? Like, whoa. Sarah, this is your idea. You're the one who marched this woman into your husband's arms. You told your husband to do this. And now when you did it, it's not going well. This is your fault. May the Lord judge between you and me. It's your fault. And a lot of times what you see in pride is this. There's no responsibility taken for your own actions. It's always somebody else's fault, right? Your idea, what you did, but I'm going to blame somebody else for it. And so what I see here is the blame shifting going on. That's pride. So I don't want to parent in pride. I don't want to operate in pride. I don't want to think that I'm better. I don't want to look down on other people. I don't want to blame other people for things that I've done. These are all signs of human pride. Now later on, I'll talk about Abram because I will say this for him, and I'll get to it a little bit later on. Where's this guy taking responsibility in this situation? Where's he settling this issue between these two gals? It seems to me this guy's just punting the ball. Hey, do whatever you want. You know, oh, she's doing this, she's doing that. Yeah, dude, treat her however you want. Do whatever you want to her. Not really coming in. So parent, here's the second main thing. I'm going to say parent by not allowing evil under your roof. And let's get back to this accusation that Abram, again, is to blame. He had to have seen the problems. There's no way does this man not know there's tension between Sarah and Hagar before this moment that she's so mean to her that she actually runs away. Right? He's got to be aware of this the whole way down the pike. What is he doing about it? So there's infighting, there's contempt, there's anger, there's jealousy, and where is he? He just says, well, do whatever you want to your servant. And I think it's so terrible because, wait. That's your wife, dude. Sarah gave her as a wife. And clearly, I looked at the original language of this. Wife. Same word is used for Sarah is used of Hagar. Sarah's a wife. He's a wife. What is he now calling her? Your servant. Not my wife anymore. It's just your servant. Why? Getting out of your responsibility, Abraham, to take any measure or steps to make this right. He doesn't stand up to her, and actually she mistreats her. And that word, when it says that he is mistreating her to the point that she runs away, Sarah mistreated, means this. It's the word that means to force, to try to force submission, to punish, to inflict pain upon. This is what she's doing. So she sees her, Hagar, getting haughty. And what Sarah does is try to get back on top of the game by being mean and mistreating her, trying to force her back into some submissive role to her as a servant. And it's not working. She's starting to get mean. She's starting to go her own way. And here's Abraham. He just punts the ball. Doesn't refer to her as a wife. Hands-off strategy. You see it? Hands off. Hagar, I'm putting this responsibility back to you. You handle it however you want. I'm not saying anything about it. I would like to suggest this is an extremely poor strategy. And I'm not going to do anything when there's nonsense going on under my roof. I grew up in a day where here's what they said, my roof, my rules. Right? Does anybody remember those words? My roof, my rules. Now I'm seeing here Abraham, who's actually, he's a great man of faith, but here to me he's just being cowardly because he's not doing anything about it, and too often we're complacent about it. He's literally feeding Hagar to an angry Sarah and allowing her to do whatever she wants. Is it the right thing to do? 2 verses, okay, about parents who did this. One comes out of 1 Kings 5 through 6. And it's a man named Adonijah. Adonijah is the son of David. David has said over and over, because I've just been reading in the Bible through these sections, David has said over and over, Solomon is going to replace me. Solomon's going to build the temple. Solomon's going to be the king. Okay, well, guess what? Dad's sick. Dad's in a bed. Dad can't even keep himself warm at night. Like, he's not doing well. He's coming to the end of his life. So Adonijah says, I'm going to set myself up as king. Bag this whole Solomon plan. I'm going to decide who's going to be king. He got other people, like key leaders, the military leader, the priest. He got other people to go with him. And in 1 Kings 1, 5 through 6, now Adonijah, whose mother was Hagar, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him. In parentheses, his father had never rebuked him by asking him, why do you behave as you do? What's the problem? Here's the Bible taking a historic fact about a guy in rebellion to his own dad, and they make this little side note here. His father had never rebuked him by asking him, why do you behave like you do? He didn't even check the behavior. My goodness, in hockey, one of the things that you got to do, and when there's somebody coming down that court trying to score on your goal, there's a thing called checking. You know what I'm saying? You don't let that guy just skate by you. You don't let him come at that goal. You check him. And too often, what we find in this life is there's not bad behavior getting checked and stopped. And let's put our foot down and end it. You're not going to, let's say, Dad, talk to your mom that way, you tell the kids. You're not going to treat her that way. You're going to respect your mom. I'm going to stand up for the right thing, right? Because I'm not going to allow this bad behavior to go unchecked. Another verse, 1 Samuel 3:13, about Eli and his two sons. His sons were horrible. In 1 Samuel 3:13, this is God now, for I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. This is why Eli's household, his whole line ended. Because God says he knew the evil that was going on under his roof, and he did nothing about it. That can't happen. You understand? We can't sit around and do nothing about it. Now, I have talked to parents and coached parents in handling hard situations. There are situations that are difficult. I always encourage them, look, don't make every conversation about the problem. Now, we're talking about kids that we're not talking about a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. We're talking about now you got a teenager and they're going in some rebellious ways. I always say, hey, keep an open line of communication. Talk about other things. How's your day at school? What's going on? Make sure you have a good relationship with your child. When you get that opportunity, you're going to have conversations about this problem. And in the meantime, you are going to make it as impossible as you possibly can for them to do what they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. You will make it as impossible as possible because you can't allow it to go unchecked. Because sin unchecked is only going to get bigger. And it's only going to get worse. And a drug problem today that might be, let's say, little, might be huge down the road. You check it now. Kids start smoking. You don't want to smoke. You know what I'm going to say? Check it now. Don't say, well, just as long as you do it at home out in the backyard. It's okay. I don't want you drinking, honey, but as long as it's under our roof, I'd rather them drink under my own roof than be out with their friends drinking and maybe have their friends come here and drink too. You know what I'm saying? Because I'd rather just observe it. How about you tell them not to do it? How about that? So I had a kid one time when I was a youth pastor back in Pennsylvania, and I told him, don't smoke at youth group. These are the kind of youth groups I had. You know what I'm saying? Don't smoke at youth group. So he's in the building. He went into the furnace room and he's lighting up smoking. So I sent him home exactly like I promised him I would do. So he's begging me not to. I did anyway. I get him back to mom and dad. Mom and dad are like, oh, yeah. We know. We let him smoke out in the backyard. It's okay. I'm like, well, it's not okay at youth group. All right? Because I'm not going to have, of my 15, 20 kids, whatever's there, 15, 20 kids going out back having cigarettes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not running a youth group like this. Do you think that stopped these parents saying, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. He's just in the backyard smoking cigarettes. You know what? When the son found out that didn't get their attention, he went on to worse things. He's not even alive today. Why? They didn't check him. They should have checked him right then. And did on everything they could to try to correct it, put a stop to it, instead of saying, it's okay. Because he goes, well, if that's okay, then something else is okay. And what they do is they just take the next step. And I'm pretty sure it was drugs in the end that they got him. I had already moved to Ohio at this point. But, I looked at the family, I'm like, guys, what are you doing? under your roof when there are things going on, you can't be like this and just punt the ball. Or put the responsibility for all the discipline on mom with mom, hey, Sarah, you take care of it. You take care of it. Where are you, dude? Because when this angel talks to her later on and goes back, tells her, go back, submit to Sarai, you know who should have said it first? Abraham should have said it. The angel's telling her exactly what to do and how to fix it. Abraham should have been the one to tell her that. God shouldn't have had to intervene like this in this situation because he should have already taken care of it in the first place. So I look at these kind of things and say, yeah, we've got to make sure that we're not cowardly when it comes to parenting because we got to realize we're responsible for what happens under our roof. And don't allow sin to exist there. Do everything you can to stop it. When you know there's something going on that shouldn't be, do everything you can. And then we also parent this way. We parent by trusting in God. In 7 through 16, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert, and it was the spring beside the road to Shur. And he said to Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? These are good questions. Where are you going? What are you going to do? Seriously, you're out here in the desert. You think you're going to survive? Do you think this woman would have made it on her own? You don't think something tragic would have happened to her? Read the stories about what was happening in those areas later on, like the book of Judges, people showing up in town squares with no place to stay. It's going to be a disaster. And so he's like, where are you going? Asking her a good question because she's not even thinking it through. She's running. He said, I'm running away from my mistress Sarah, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord said to her, you're now pregnant. You will give birth to a son. You will name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. You're going to have a son, and we've got to trust God, and even the times in making changes. I think for her, she goes, go back, and even, I was interested, even the angel calls her a servant, reminding her, hey, this is your position. Sometimes it's good to remind ourselves that we're not as big a deal as we think we are at times. And it says in the Bible, in Romans 12:3, for by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the truth that God has distributed to each one of us. Sometimes the way to handle a problem and a big difficulty, especially relationally, is just to humble ourselves. Not saying in every situation. I'm saying there are certainly situations where I just need to humble myself. And if my pride is part of it, then I've got to take that and acknowledge it. And so, Hagar, you need to go back and submit. She could say, but she's a monster. She's mean. She's made my life miserable. I can't raise a child in that. You're right. You don't want to raise a child in that. You don't have to raise a child in that kind of situation. What you need to do is do your part to calm that down. And you acting with contempt, and you being a smart aleck, and you making snide remarks is not making your situation better. What you need to do is go back and do everything that you can to make the situation right. You're not asking her to go back and take the same thing, right? I want you to go back and I want you to start doing what you can to make this situation right. So she's putting herself in that bad situation. Now, I would like to clarify because I don't want anyone to mistake what I'm saying here. I would not tell a woman abused to go back into an abusive situation. I would not. I mean, I'm not going to do it for sure. Things where, I hear these stories about, hey, there's drugs being sold in my, and it's rare, by the way, but sometimes you'll hear, drugs are being sold, blah, blah, blah. I am not saying go back into some situation that's so sinfully destructive. This is not that situation, all right? This is Abram and Sarah. It's not that kind of thing. A lot of these problems are personality. A lot of these things can be worked out, and where they can be worked out, in this case, they need to be worked out. So she's telling her to go back. In Ephesians 5:21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And oftentimes I find there's peace when we put our own will aside, right? Don't just press our own way, we put our own will aside. And we find there's going to be peace. So I've got to trust God and make changes. And also trust that God hears. I love the fact that God notices this misery and has not escaped his attention. And guess what? It's not going to escape his attention when you're hurting either. He sees that. We're talking about a God who knows every hair on your head. We're talking about a God who knows every sparrow that falls. Says that he clothes the grass of the field, right? It's here today, gone tomorrow. He cares. And so what is my faith, as a parent, what do I need to know? Like when I'm having problems, I'm going through a hard time. What do I need to know? God's there. It's going to be okay. And I need to trust God in all of these things. And I also need to trust him for blessing. The angel lays out the blessing that's going to come. And it's so, man, it's mind-blowing, really, honestly. Man, what a weird situation this is. I mean, this whole Sarah-Hagar thing, I've often wondered about it. It's so strange to me, and it causes so many problems, even in the future. And yet I see God's blessing. Even in these woeful decisions we make, these unwise things that we do at times, I see God still coming through even then. Right? You look at David and Bathsheba. Solomon is a son that comes to them later days. Between David and Bathsheba, why would God use anyone from Bathsheba when the whole thing started in adultery in the first place? It's such a bad decision. I think the whole thing was a bad deal. Him having her husband killed. The whole 9 yards was terrible. And yet God, even in that situation, brought good. And even in this hurtful situation, this hard situation, he says, hey, listen, Hagar, your son, you're going to have so many descendants, you'll never be able to count them. And God's going to bless in this situation. Even bless the bad, even bless the pain. I think of children coming into the world. Man, children come into the world in good situations. Children come into the world in bad situations. But you know what? God's still there, right? And God still blesses, and God still helps. And that's what we got to count on. Yeah, not everyone's coming in, by the way, and not even in this county. Not by any stretch of the imagination is every kid coming in this world and having equal footing. There is just no way. Children are coming in all kinds of situations in our own county. We need to trust God. God, you're going to be there for these kids. And hopefully through Adventure Club, hopefully in youth group, hopefully in the other children's ministries that we do, we can help, right? Build homes, build better families, build homes, encourage and strengthen people. But I got to also trust, listen, there's only so much I can do. God, look at what God can do. God's going to bless in a hard and a painful situation, and I love that about God. We also got to trust God. He sees in 13 through 16, and we'll end here. It says, she gave him the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. For she said, I've now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well is called Bir Lahoi Roy, and it's still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave him the name Ishmael to the son that she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Now, forward, he's going to be 100 when Isaac, the son of promise, is born. So it's still another 14 years for this promise to be fulfilled yet. It'll be a long road to go. But here she says, I've seen the one who sees me. And she gave him that name to God. God is the God who sees. Do you believe that? Your family today, God sees your family. God knows your family. God's going to be there for your family. He's going to help your family. So we want to parent in humility. We don't want to allow evil to be going on under our roof. And we want to keep trusting God. Whatever we're encountering, whatever we're going through, Lord, my cry, my pleas, what is it about your family you're hurting about? What is it about your family you're concerned about? Are you bringing it to God and just talking to him about it? Let's stand as we close this time in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for a chance to look at this story. It's kind of it's this awkward story for us in our culture, and you're still working in it, and you're still bringing good out of it, and I'm thankful for that, and we can still learn lessons of humility from it, and lessons of trust from it, and lessons of what we need to make sure we're taking our responsibility seriously. We learn that from it. So God, help us to take good things as moms and dads both on this Mother's Day and just take it forward. And we'll give you all the praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen.